we went down to Rendlesham and we walked the UFO trail. Now we have to wonder, is the Rendlesham Forest incident really the British Roswell? Well, in 2011, the MOD released all of their UFO files, but strangely, out of the 8,000 documents, there was a telling gap. The place where the Rendlesham Forest file should have been was missing. So, the Rendlesham Forest incident, was it a light from a lighthouse? Was it the SAS playing tricks? Or was it really a UFO seen by multiple witnesses? Hi guys, we are live and welcome to Mystery Machine. How the hell are we, everybody?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Hot, very hot and sweaty, and sweaty in places I don't want to mention.
Melting.
Alright guys, we're talking about Rendlesham Forest because at the weekend, me and Damien here went down there and visited the iconic place. Something I've wanted to do for ages. So really glad we got to do that. It's nice to actually see a location rather than just reading about it or looking out on books. Actually to be there and touch it was, I think, added a lot to it. Any of you guys ever been down there or in that area? Is that of interest?
No.
Never asked.
I'd like to go there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful part of the country. Yeah, I've been.
Yeah, I've been a few areas down that neck of the woods, mainly Felixstowe, but yeah, I did give it a quick visit in the early 2000s.
Yeah, beautiful part of the world. Before we get started, then, what do you guys think about the just the little starting video there I just said about the MOD documents when they released all the UFO files a few years ago? I think it was 2011. They accidentally somehow managed to lose the Rendlesham Forest bit. So the bit of the files that should have had the Rendlesham Forest in was just completely missing. And the theories go between, obviously, it's a cover-up or somebody took them home with them, which was just... That's a good excuse enough for the government. Somebody must have took them.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Interesting incident to take the case files on, I guess, isn't it? You can't rule that one out, I suppose.
Yeah.
You had some documents found on a bus stop a couple of weeks ago in Kent, weren't there? Left by some official or something. So yeah,
it doesn't surprise me in the slightest when you're dealing with the fact that a lot of the information that they released regarding UFOs, anything reported to our Secretariat, Air Staff 2A, or anything like that, is always pretty much, I'm trying to be nice here, he's pretty much redacted or pretty much non-committal with everything that it's dealing with, and all based around UK sightings. However, Rendlesham, it's a little bit different. It's the American military personnel, British police officers. So I can understand why that's been taken out. I'm not condoning it, but it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that it was missing in 2011. But other things were. If you actually look at a lot of it was missing. Yeah,
it seemed like anything that was really interesting got missing. Shrimp Shack. Who is sweating their bits off? All of us.
All of us.
And hi, Tammy. How are you doing? Right. So we'll just get stuck into it, shall we, guys? So our video has gone up about Rendlesham that tells you all about what actually happened on the day. So with this video, we're going to really debate about what happened sort of kind of afterwards, what eyewitnesses there were, what people said, what arguments there have been, because there's been a few, and then what we really think happened, or what our opinion is on what we discussed. So we're going to start off with Larry Warren, mainly because it lets me get Nick Pope out of the way. So literally the only reason I went with Larry Warren first. So Larry Warren, he says he was there. He says he saw a UFO over a farm field. His story changes depending on what interview you've seen. Sometimes he says he actually saw aliens, like children, like aliens floating under the vehicle. Sometimes he doesn't mention that. He says he's seen UFO objects before and after, shining lights towards the nuclear bunkers and where the nuclear weapons were on the base, which I think is interesting straight away, because we've got lots of cases, haven't we, of UFOs in and around nuclear bases, nuclear weapons, nuclear materials.
Yeah.
What do you think about that before I move on? it seems to happen quite a lot, doesn't it?
It does.
Certain nuclear installations seem to stop functioning in the presence of a UFO. They shut down. There's a case, isn't there? There's a case in the Greer's 2001 disclosure project, where there was an intercontinental ballistic missile with a nuclear warhead that they watched the UFO zap it from atop, below, front and behind, and then it just drops out the sky disarmed. So yeah, there seems to be some of these stories, doesn't there? It's like there's a real interest in these big weapons.
I think Robbins is particularly, Robbins, that's the guy who wrote the book with. Warren is particularly interesting in that he said he was the first one to break the story. Other people have said the story was broken before him. But Larry Warren was the first one. He went to the News of the World that got chucked, thankfully, because they're a bunch of scumbags. And he broke the story in 1983. So only 3 years after the incident. He then co-authored a book with this Robbins fella, Left at the Gate, in 1997, which was a very popular book. I don't think it ever went to bestseller thing, but it sold a lot of copies. He claimed that there was lots of eyewitnesses to the UFO over the farmer's field. Unfortunately, there's been a bit of an argument the last few years. Basically, his wife, or his ex-wife, I believe it was, Sasha Christie, has come out and basically said he's a liar. He might not have even been there. He actually argues that he said he was in Germany from Christmas Eve and that he was there a few nights. He might have got back on the 27th, which would be the night before the 28th, so the second incident he might have witnessed. There's some arguments there that he wasn't actually even at Rendlesham or Woodbridge at the time, that he'd only just passed his basic training sort of thing. So, I mean, there's a lot of argument to believe that he possibly is just a massive liar. And there's this Adrian Bustinza chap that was there and did witness a great deal. This Sasha Christie just says, actually, he's just stole his story and just ran with it. This Adrian sort of said he was there at one point and then kind of said, actually, I was just sort of following what I was told. He wasn't really. I don't actually remember him being there. And it went backwards and forwards. So what do you guys know about old Larry? What do you think about his story?
Where do you want me to start?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's worth noting that Larry Warren was on guard at Perimeter Outpost 18 on the night of the 28th.
He says.
And I will say this, actually. As far as I'm aware, because you did say depending upon the interview or what you hear from Larry Warren will dictate whether he mentions these childlike beings that were encased in these lozenges of light after the red ball of light exploded over Capel Green on the night of the 28th. It has to be noted that the beings tend to make more of an appearance in his earlier recollections of the story than they do later on. Occasionally they do later on, but not to the same extent. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. But Larry Warren's on guard at Perimeter Outpost 18, eastern end of the runway. And he starts to hear chatter coming over the radio. Things like the back and there's lights shining over the base again and out over the trees. And then everything goes deathly quiet and he sees a deer jump over the perimeter fence and run across the east end of the runway. And then he gets a call saying that Staff Sergeant Adrian Bustinza and Lieutenant Bruce England are going to pick him up and then make their way out into the forest, to which they do with various other people, various other military personnel. And he says when he gets into the forest that there are other military vehicles there that are parked up and obviously large groups of teams of people already out there. So they disembark and he isn't with Adrian Bustinza. He goes off with another group that go further into the forest and then they end up on the outskirts of this field at Capel Green. And obviously all the farm animals going crazy because of this. He sees a red light come in from over the North Sea, which sort of does like a spirally kind of motion and arcs down towards the floor. When he first arrives, he also describes seeing like a platform of mist on the ground, like a fog. That's almost looks like it's solid on the floor of the on the ground of the field. And there's plenty of personnel there, including civilians. At one point, he mentions civilians that were dressed in suits. He mentions, high-ranking officers, British police officers, British military high-ranking personnel. And there's people there with cameras. There's people there with video cameras. This thing comes down, this orange ball, rests on top of this platform of this mist, and explodes into different shards. Which doesn't make a sound. The explosion doesn't make a sound, and then there's a bluey gold kind of light then comes out of the side of this object, because he says, well, after the explosion, he can then see a triangular or pyramidal shaped craft, which is about 30 foot at the base, something like that. And then out of the right hand side of it comes this bluish golden orb thing. Which he then describes as having 3 lozenges inside, and each one of these lozenges contains what looks like a person. And this is like about, what is it, a foot off the floor and about 4 foot in height. And inside these, you can see these lozenges with what looks like beings, which he describes as hairless, but they're wearing clothes, which are attached to some form of apparatus. They're attached to something. And then he says that they get recalled back, which I find a little bit weird that it gets to this level of he's there to witness these beings briefly, but then for some reason all the military personnel are called back, and he doesn't go into any description as to how, just that they're called back by a ranking system. So the lower the rank you are, the quicker you're called back and you're out of there. Now he's saying as he's heading back to the motor pool, he's seeing lights out in the trees that he describes as being exactly the same as this red one. Sometimes it's an orange one, an amber. We'll forgive him for that, but sometimes it's red, sometimes it's amber. And these other lights in the trees he's describing as being exactly the same, and he got the feeling that they were guarding or watching out or providing cover for this one that had landed on this mist platform. And then his story sort of peters out, really. He sort of goes back to the trucks, and then that's him. There's various bits that he's added onto afterwards, but that's pretty much the broad outline of what Larry Warren was up to that night. And the main basis for the book, like you said, left at Eastgate. That's a brief rundown of what he was up to, allegedly what he was up to.
He did this book with Peter Robbins. And I mean, it was only a few years ago, Peter Robbins basically come out and went, he's a liar. I mean, just very aggressively. And he'd been deceived, he'd been lied to. Like I say, there's this Christie, Sasha Christie. I've read and watched a bit on Sasha Christie. To me, she comes across to me as she's got an agenda. She seems very angry. Larry has accused her of faking bits, because there's a photo of an A10. There's got a UFO in the photo. So I'm only now described that it's actually fake. Excuse me. But when it was sort of, at first Larry sort of like really backed the photo up, said no, it's not. And then when he did say it's fake, he blamed this Sasha, said it was her. And then he said it was Nick Pope. Looking at Larry's sort of like some of his videos and some of his Facebook, he seems to have a little bit of a problem where he'll get drunk and then just go on social media and just yell at people, and which he seems to quite like to do.
And that's what social media is for, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Well, he slammed Nick Pope, but we can get Nick Pope out of the way really quickly. But he slammed Nick Pope for whoring himself out. He said Nick Pope is just jealous because his book tanked after a few months, whereas Larry's book's been in print for 20 years and will be for another 100. It won't be, by the way, because it's been removed. Just for that, but because the publisher said that they have serious doubts about the credibility of the material and that it doesn't potentially meet their standards.
Well, Nick Pope did one with 2 of the people, didn't he? 2 of the witnesses from the base, army personnel. What was it? Encounters, Rendlesham Forest, I think it was called. Did that tank? Did it?
It did tank. Yeah, I think every book. Sorry, I think every book that he's done has tanked. Really, in comparison to some of the bigger known authors, I don't know, Timothy Gordon, Nick Redfern, or whoever, the more well known UFO authors, if you like. Jenny Randall's, people like that. It has tanked in comparison, but he was very. There was a lot of vernacular in his description about what he thought about Nick Pope. But that can't be denied. I do have to say one thing though. It's not very often. I mean, this is. I don't want to make it a sweeping statement, so not all the time, but it's not very often that an ex-partner will speak too highly of somebody they've broken up with. You know, it isn't uncommon for an ex to speak badly of someone. So I just thought I'd throw that. We all know that, but
no, it's very true. And like I said, a lot of what she comes over, it sounds like a very angry ex.
Yeah,
she sounds like she's got an agenda. So what he says about Nick Pope, though, I mean, even though it's angry and I don't like the way he does it, I actually do agree with him. I think Nick Pope does whore himself out. He says that he was on this UFO, like desk at the Air Corps, and that's been put into question about actually how important a role that was. Yeah, he was the guy that he was basically just an admin for it, whereas he made out that he was researching stuff.
It's lost a lot of credibility over the years, definitely.
Do you know what he reminds me of? Do you know what he reminds? He reminds me of a receptionist at a doctor's surgery.
That's a good way of putting that. I like that.
He really does remind me of a receptionist at a doctor's surgery.
What are your symptoms? Well, your business. Give me a doctor.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I think that's a very good way of explaining it, actually. So, what do we think, though? Do we think this Larry is telling the truth? Because you mentioned a bit about the light exploding. You could say that is backed up by Colonel Holt. He says he describes something very similar.
Mm-hmm.
He also said that when the flash of light. I'm sorry, brother, but when he says that the flash of light went off, that it was blinding. Even Charles Holt described it as when he looked through the star scope when it was in the trees. Well, I'm probably going into that later, and maybe that it was that bright that it looked like an eye winking at him kind of thing, but massively bright. But Larry Warren said that when it exploded, it damaged his eyes. He started to have problems with his eyes. Because of that, and he even had to see a doctor on the base a few days later about his eyes, and went to the hospital because of that. By a military, especially a military doctor, and he's got the chitty as evidence. He's still got that, and I find it. I would sort of find it strange that he would make everything else up and only use that one, if you like, flimsy piece of evidence to say, look, I was on the base at that time. Now, he undoubtedly was on the base at that time. So he was never there at all is, for me, it's not really called into question. He was there. He was stationed there. He saw a doctor there because he was having problems with his eyes. Is that related to a UFO, alleged UFO encounter? Don't know. Was he there on the 26th? He wasn't there on the 26th because that's Penistone Burrows and so on. But was he there on the 28th?
We're not sure.
I don't know. But it means
sometimes he also says that he was he'd been on duty 2.5 weeks or something. And other times he says the 28th was his first day, which is, again, he's not very consistent at times with his stories.
Yeah.
But he does say he took a lie detector. After all this kicked off between him and Robbins, he took a lie detector. And there was this copper, whose name I've written down, but I can't see it. Never mind.
Gary Heseltine.
Gary Heseltine, thank you. Yeah. So, ex-policeman who really is a big supporter of Larry's story. And he says, yes, he did this, and he's contested that they did a lie detector. They've never actually released who did the lie detector test.
I found, sorry again, I found in many cases of things like this, when people talk about, the polygraph, having a polygraph test, that you very rarely find out who the people are that administer this polygraph test and their credentials. And I think it's also worth mentioning, it only measures 3 things, a polygraph. It's very easy to cheat a polygraph.
Galvanic skin response, heart rate, and
correct.
Something else in it. But I personally don't think it's evidence, a polygraph. I think and there's a reason why they're not allowed in court, you know. So if you had to put money on it, is he lying or is he telling the truth? Because Steve, what do you think?
Truth. But yeah, but just his inconsistency, not inconsistencies, but missing bits out and sort of changing his story a little bit and stuff like that. But yeah, he was definitely there. He was definitely there. But how much he was involved with, that's the question.
Yeah. Dave?
Well, for me, it's the human condition to embellish even the truth. The further back in time the truth is, the more embellished it becomes in the present. And that's part of the human condition. It's part of our psyche to do that, to reinforce certain aspects of what we remember into long-term memory, rather than, digital memory, short-term memory. It's normal for the human condition to do that. So embellishment doesn't necessarily mean a liar. Out-and-out lies are also difficult to detect, especially if there's no way of proving somebody's a liar. There are things that he can prove that he did do that are in, that in correlation to his claims. And people don't really tell half lies. It's normally, full committal or they tell the truth. So I'm sort of with Steve. I think he was there. I think he was there. However, I think his actual involvement has been massively exaggerated.
Yeah. Damien, what do you think, mate?
Well, that's pretty much where I was going to head with it. I was going to say, yeah, I mean, you'd think that, I suppose the only things to add to what Dave said is you'd think it would have been a very memorable event that day if he had seen what he claimed to have seen. You'd think that the memory of the specifics around that would probably be quite good because of it being such a significant event, of something you can't explain. So you might get a bit, I suppose, a bit wavy around the edges, like what happened the day before or the day after. But you'd think that the day that it actually occurred, you'd remember it. So I don't really, I don't like the fact that he's not telling the same story all the time. That's a bit weird, and he probably has embellished it a lot, his involvement a lot more than he actually was, just because he was at the base at that time.
You see, the thing is over time. And like I was saying, it's more than human for details to become blurred and facts to become lost in emotional memories. So the emotion of a lot of the things that went on in the night are more likely to take over. His reaction to the way people have treated him because of his story of the event is likely to become an emotive force in the way that he tells it, which will make him blur the facts even more as time goes on. That's sort of what I meant by the embellishment thing. It's completely normal for people to do that. We all sort of do that. And indeed, that's why you can have multiple witnesses to one event with many different interpretations of what they see, depending upon their emotive state at any one given time.
Yeah, where their perception is at the time. So,
one more thing, he was on the perimeter, wasn't he? So, he may well have seen something if he was stationed on the perimeter over the nights there, if he wasn't one of the ones sent out. It is still possible.
Think, Jim?
I think he's a big fat liar.
Oh,
I think he's taken lots of other people's stories. I think he probably heard stories on the base, and he went for it. I think he probably did see something. But I do agree. I don't agree with Dave a little bit in saying that people either lie or tell the truth. I actually think good liars wrap the lies in truth, so they tell a bit of truth and a bit of a lie. And particularly if they're fantasists, they tend to take a truth and then just add to it and make it more exciting and make it more interesting.
I want to add to that a little bit if I can as well. The thing about also about liars is they will tell you more information than is needed to know or pertinent to the relevant question that's been put to them. They will also give you a resume statement. And that's to say that when somebody's lying to you or they try to avoid a question, they will list off all the good things they've done that will offset why what they're saying shouldn't be true. So rather than give you an honest yes or no answer, they will give you a list of all the good things they've done and how well they are at doing things, just to sort of reinforce any kind of believability that you're going to have before they even start their statement. And I do see that I've watched a lot of Larry Warren interviews, and I see that all over the place. The resume statement.
I was just going to say I think that's exactly what he does. So when I'm watching him speak, I just think he comes over like a snake charm salesman. He comes over as salesman. It doesn't come over as genuine to me. But who knows? And like I said, a lot of what he said has been backed up by other parts of the story, whether he's just read that story and then passed it on as his own or what. And the stuff about lights and beams of light over the nuclear bunkers and stuff.
I will say, when it comes to assassinating somebody's character, and before we move on, before it comes to assassinating somebody's character, you have to make sure the assassin has all the correct tools. Okay, and there's a reason why we have the statement "glass houses, cold cheese."
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's I've had run-ins. There was a case that I was involved with at Strangford Lock in Northern Ireland. And I thought, for the sake of schnitz and schniggles, so I say, I'll approach Nick Pope and see what he thinks of a course of action. I've never known anybody to be so doddering, unhelpful, and have no idea whatsoever, but really good at stating the obvious in my entire life. For somebody who puts himself out at the forefront, and Nick, I've saved the screenshots of everything. I'm telling the truth. He has no idea whatsoever. Have you thought about phoning the police to see if they can corroborate? Oh, really? Well, thank you for that. I hadn't thought of that. That's sort of covered in Investigation 101, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He was a tie. He did sit behind a desk. He was a desk jockey. He wasn't a field investigator. He was admin, and he's quick to slate everybody else off. And a media whore is a very good description of Nick Pope, in my opinion.
I completely agree with you. We did a video about it. How he's just fake. It's just he's gone with a little. He's a perfect example of having a little bit of truth and building a big fat ass lie around it. But he's always very careful. You watch him interviews. He never really lies. He's politician answers all the time and just dancing around it. He never really. He lets other people lie for him.
He doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't answer questions. Exactly. He changes it round, doesn't he, to what he wants to say.
He wouldn't have to. He wouldn't have to do that. But if what he was saying was factual, because the facts don't care about your feelings or opinions.
Yeah,
that's just the truth.
Something like that.
Yeah. It seems like it's the TV reporter will go, "Oh, it's the real Fox Mulder," and just sits there and really quietly. I've never seen him call himself that, but he must say it on the brief beforehand. So he lets other people say that, and then he just sits there and goes. It's just I can't stand Nick Pope. I had so much respect for him for years, and then somebody mentioned it to me through this that he's full of shit, and I thought, okay, I'm going to look into that. And the more I looked into it, I was like, "You're fucking lying." Something. Right. Okay.
I've got one of his books on my shelf. I didn't buy it. I didn't buy it. It was given to me. I've got to give it back. He
says really sensible stuff, but it's like Dave said, it's obvious stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of the time. But I quote him a lot, saying that, he said that thing about like 95% of sightings are probably not real. And it's the 5% we should be interested in. I quote that a lot because I think that makes complete sense to me. And we'll talk about our sighting at the weekend later. That's kind of like emphasising that point.
Sorry, Jamie, to jump in, brother, but I feel quite emotional about like Nick Pope myself, so I have got things to say. It's that kind of mentality where he's spewing out that kind of like diatribe as being an all-encompassing, sweeping statement to get out of answering any proper questions has been done for years. I mean, Blue Book, does nobody remember that kind of thing? Well, a big chunk of them, don't worry about them, but it's that small percentage. Well done, Nick. We've only been hearing it for 50 years.
But he makes lots of statements like that about how maybe this would be a threat, but the MOD are looking into this, and they do. He makes just really obvious, but he's just wheeled out every time there's a new UFO movie.
Yeah.
And then he talks about nonsense. He doesn't. But that's my point. He doesn't say anything really.
No.
It's maddening. Right, anyway, let's move on. James Penniston and the download. So obviously, Sergeant Penniston was one of the first people to arrive at the scene with Burroughs. He was actually got really close up to the object in the end. He talks about this field of influence that he actually went into, and the Burroughs was sort of like frozen on the outside of.
Yeah.
The interesting thing I mentioned, mentioned earlier that Warren says he looked into the bright light and it burned his retina. Yeah. The interesting point Penniston makes was that he looked into the bright light when it was, I think it was when he actually touched it. He mentions this, but then he was able to look away from the object, and his night vision wasn't touched at all.
Wasn't affected, yeah.
I find that a really interesting fact. Hi, Sophie. That's a fascinating fact to me because, I mean, where do you get that from if it's not true?
Which part of it, Jamie, are you referring to? Where do you get what from if it's not true?
Well, I've never heard of anything like that. Look, you look into a bright light and then you look away and your night vision isn't affected. Right? I've never really heard that before. No, if it's a lie, he's made that up.
Yeah.
You know, where would you get that from?
He's from my memory of all the stuff I've read and seen is he saw or felt a flash of bright light. So he said he saw or he felt a flash of bright light when he touched the hieroglyphs on the side, which he said the entire side of this craft, which was like metallic but like polished like black glass with shining red and blue lights in it that like pulsated and shimmered around inside the fabric of this craft. It was smooth to the touch until he touched the hieroglyphics, and then they were like sandpaper, he said. And that's when he got this, he saw or felt a flash and then started to get this digital download. So maybe his night vision wasn't touched because he didn't visually see it.
Yeah,
it was just,
that's what he's trying to explain, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean. It's such an interesting detail that is, you know, if it's a lie, it's a very clever lie. And it's, I'm not quite sure where he's got it from, but it's very clever. So if we talk about immediately after this Rendlesham, he does talk about this debrief and how he was. He says he wrote down like a 4-page debrief, and then these guys who were interviewing him sort of took it away, came back with it like this 1/4-page printed off version, vanilla version of what he was supposed to say. Burroughs was said the pencil at one point literally disappeared from his side and reappeared later, at which point he had a recollection the rest of the night till the next morning when he woke up.
True that, yeah. Burroughs said that he also like jumped onto the side of the craft, and as it moved through the trees, he was getting like dragged along as if he was riding a dolphin kind of thing through the trees for a short period of time. That's what he said. Don't shoot the messenger.
No. I think Burroughs said a few things over the years that it's a little strange, but I do think. Well, if we get to the one point, like I said, Penniston he was told this version of the story. He actually got this story about how he was he had to lie to a general, and then he met him years later and apologized to him, and the general just sort of said, "Don't worry, we all had our orders," sort of thing, which I think fits perfectly with this. And he was just told basically, write everything down, don't worry about it, you don't have to think about it again. And in lots of ways, it's true because Penniston didn't really think about it for years. And that's one of the arguments that have said that maybe he's not telling the truth because he's added to the story over years. He's gone into hypnosis regression and all of a sudden remembered a load more stuff. How important do you think that is? Or do you think maybe the impact and the psychological impact of such a horrific, such a emotionally, traumatic
charged event? Yeah.
It explains that.
No, I think the military is the perfect environment for boxing an environment like that, boxing an experience like that, and putting it away. It benefits both the army in terms of the secrecy of the incident, and also benefits the person's career.
Yeah,
I think that's exactly why you go along with it, and then that's when most people retire or on their deathbeds, and they don't care anymore about going to prison for saying something they shouldn't. And they tend to spill the beans.
Holt says exactly that, to be honest, isn't he? That he's going to come out with a lot of his story until he retired.
I think when he started to get this binary information, what he described as like a download from the craft directly to Penniston, it made him like feel nauseous and slightly disorientated, which is understandable. He sort of like was feeling that until he got back to the base, and he says that when he started to write down these pages of this code, that the more that he wrote down, the better that he started to feel because of it. He
was almost grateful to get it out, wasn't he?
Yeah,
I think he talks about that he was going mad. He thought he was going insane, but then he got all this down on paper, and he thought, "Oh no, I'm all right. I'm not going."
And he didn't look at it for 30 years. He didn't look at it for 30 years. He kept it in this notebook. That was it. out of the way, hidden underneath all the pictures of cats from the past and your grandma, all that kind of thing, hidden out of the way for 30 years. That's 3 decades for anybody who's paying attention. And then all of a sudden,
I think that's quite believable. It's his memento, isn't it, of the night? It's his sort of physical notes of that occurrence that's extremely unbelievable. That to anybody he's telling the story to, but he's got some physical evidence of that night still. So I think it's quite likely, and the hiding, not touching it for 30 years. Oh, and also not knowing what binary what was, so not re-understanding what the ones and zeros were that he'd even written down. I suppose going back, this is 1980, and a lot of people probably didn't understand computers, perhaps in the way we do today.
Forget about it all as well.
I think that's completely believable that he wouldn't know what binary was.
Yep.
So again, if you play devil's advocate, if he was lying, do you think he potentially wrote all that down years later? That it was all because the binary wasn't gibberish.
No, the binary was far from gibberish.
Yeah. So could he have faked it years later?
I don't think he would have faked the message.
Yes, he could. He could.
Yeah, he could have.
Did he is another question, because retrospectively we could say that about anybody. So he could have done, but is it likely? I mean, I don't know for sure about this. This is something that one part of it that I've not looked into, but has it been checked? I mean, how do you go about carbon dating a spiral-bound notepad back in the day, y'all? Would that be necessary? Why would he want to do that just to fit in with his story? So, yeah, he could, but I'm doubtful that he did.
I don't think he faked. You watch Peniston talk, and to be honest, I've watched 2 or 3 of his interviews in the last few days. It's really, really, he's really, really believable. Yeah, just comes across. He uses humor. I don't see any major tells of his lying. He tells the story, and it's like you said, Dave, earlier that he doesn't have too much information. No, but then he's just telling a story. He's painting a picture, but it's a picture that I don't know. He just screams truth to me, even though some of the things he says is very difficult. So if we say what some of the binary stuff is, so some of the things I haven't written them all down, but the first thing is it comes out with High Brazil, which when we did in our Atlantis episodes many moons ago, we talked about High Brazil, and it's this small island off Ireland.
Off the west coast of Ireland.
Yeah, and it is definitely there. It's about 70 feet under the water today, but before the Younger Dryas event, it was exposed and it was an island. A lot of people have pointed at that as the potential site for Atlantis, or what Plato talked of as Atlantis. The next one is exploration of humanity.
Exploration of humanity, yeah.
666 8100.
Okay.
Origin year 8100.
Origin year 8100, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a series of coordinates.
Yeah, you come up with eyes of our eyes and continuous exploration for humanity. Yeah. Something like that, yeah.
He didn't know about this until he says there was the regression in 1994 was when he sort of started to realise the importance of this code. But then there's a series of coordinates: the Sedona, Arizona, the Pyramid of Giza, the Gaza lines, the Nazca lines. Or part of the Nazca lines, Taishankou in China, and an area of Belize called Karakol.
The Temple of Apollo as well. Temple of Apollo's in there,
yeah. Just basically some of the world's most major sites.
Sacred, baby. Sacred.
Civilization-wise, some of some of the most important places, really, I suppose, for humankind in our recent history that we're aware of.
It says in almost all of these sites there's a pyramid at almost all of them, which is again really interesting. The coordinates are normally just off, but we've discussed this before, haven't we, Damien? That the coordinates for Giza, the coordinates to the speed of light is ever so slightly off the actual pyramid, but actually tectonic plates move anything up to like a foot a year or a few inches a year. So I kind of understand that if somebody put a coordinates a long time ago, that it would be now not quite accurate. And people point out, I go, it's not right quite. It's actually to the left, isn't it? I'm like, crap moves, mate.
Yeah, but the margin of error is pretty slim.
And the margin of error is
standards. Yeah.
It's like an inch. So it's pretty accurate. And then said, and they said the eyes of your eyes, like you said, Dave, and then it actually goes to High Brazil again. So he said High Brazil seemed to be very important because it was like the first and the last thing that was mentioned.
Well, supposedly there's Celtic tradition, isn't there, that talks about that island and it almost being like an Atlantis for the Celtic.
It's mentioned in some medieval maps as well.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, it appeared in some maps, doesn't it, from like the 1500s? Was it a bit earlier, 1400s, somewhere around there, I think. Which is interesting.
70 foot of sea level rise has been.
Yeah, but land masses can rise and sink. We know this.
Yeah.
If one bit of if some kind of tectonic plate shift happens and pressure's released somewhere, it can cause one landmass to rise somewhere, or like if all the polar ice caps melt, some of the land will push back up from the weight release off of it. So I think it is very possible that it was not the Younger Dryas, and it wasn't perhaps at the current height that it is, and maybe it's sunk, like the story about Atlantis sinking into the sea after a cataclysmic event of some
far more
description.
recently though than we potentially realised.
We know that land masses can be submerged. You've just got to look at Dogger Bank, haven't you?
Yeah,
Dogger Bank. Dogger Bank was that was before the Younger Dryas. I think there was Younger Dryas that flooded. I always think that I remember seeing it's on the Discovery Channel years ago, and it was near Yellowstone, to be fair. But this guy, he was a ranger, and he says, I was coming over the hill, and I was expecting to see a lake, and I'd only been here 3 days before, and the lake was gone. And it wasn't a little lake; it was a huge lake. There's been a tectonic rise, and the ground had opened up slightly, and all the water had just gone. And instead of the lake, there was a little hill, and that happened in like 3 days. You can get quite dramatic changes. I mean, that's an example. It's near Yellowstone, which is
Yellowstone fluctuates, doesn't it, by a few feet a year in height? I think on average, every year.
Fluctuates quite a lot.
I wouldn't feel safe on there for very long, especially not if they've just recently upped the warning status.
Now, when that shit goes off, America is anyway.
God, yeah.
When was the last one? About 630,000 years ago. One before that was 800. So I reckon there's one coming soon, don't they?
I think when that goes, we'll all know about it when that goes. Don't make no mistake about
that. We need the caves in Derinkuyu again.
That's very true. They reckon there is a plan. They're going to drill into it and pump water down into it to try and cool the cold air. Or there's a plan. There's an idea to do that. And I'm like, yeah. Have you never seen a sci-fi movie ever? Whenever these things, somebody tries to do that, what happens?
Never works, does it? But there we go.
It seems like a poor idea. But yeah, I mean, Dave's right there. There's hundreds of legends that are linked to these sorts of things in the beginning of time. So Penniston does talk about this. He talks about how there's like a math to the universe. And that's been talked about a lot through science over the years, that if ever we actually hear from an alien species first, the chances are it's going to be in like some sort of math. But he does point out the binary codes in English. So he argues then that his first theory is that he doesn't think this was potentially aliens. He thinks this was possibly a probe sent back potentially from future humans, maybe some sort of dimensional.
Well, it was interesting the message stated the year. So it's quite. Also, if given the experience that he had and the believability when you're telling this story to other people, would you go and make up that message saying it was from the future as well, and then you've got to throw time travel into it as well to be believed? I just don't think you'd lie like that. I don't know. Just a point I thought I'd raise there.
No, I think it's good.
Would you? It just seems like it's one too far, isn't it, to try and on the believability scale?
You might have been spending 30 years making it up, though. This could have been 30 years in the making.
You'd come up with something better, wouldn't you? 30 years.
I think it's a pretty good story, to be honest. I just like that. I mean, he's worked with like these Rendlesham researchers, hasn't he, a lot, and that he used this team that were interested in the area, and that's
Oh,
He did. He did work with people. Yes, he found out all sorts of information. He said lots of things, and we're all very much better off because of it. So, thank you, there, Jimmy Peniston. How y'all doing, people? Until our host comes back, there he is. We got him back. Hello.
fantastic.
Hey, how you doing?
Is this your 200 meg Virgin? Now they've upgraded
Stupid
you from the
internet.
100 meg.
No, I'm on something else now, but it's been quite
No, I
reliable
know.
until then. But anyway, so yeah, he does talk about the math and that how it was. This seems to have been built in, and it seems to have been built in like a really advanced way. So maybe even a really advanced society, maybe tier 2 sort of species, which I forget which one is. We're tiered nothing, aren't we? But maybe like absorbing power from the universe. Someday, you remember that? Do you remember the 4 tiers to the?
Is it 4? I suppose type 0 is when you're still burning fossil fuels for power.
Yeah.
Type 1 would be harnessing the power of your
solar.
sun. Type 2, your galaxy. Type 3, the entire universe. But I don't know what you do with a type 3, because couldn't you potentially destroy the universe? I don't know. I wouldn't want to go meta in there. But anyway,
yeah.
The topic.
That's the Big Bang. No, because Peniston talked about it. He talked about maybe this is a level 2 species. Maybe this is a species that could travel through time, and Peniston brought it up. So it's on topic.
And fitting in with Professor Mallett's like interpretation of being able to send binary code via subatomic particles, whether they're pointing up or down, and sending them back through time by containing this information. So you got Professor Mallet who's sort of like rocking this idealism that you can. He's done quite a lot of research into time travel. Look up, is it Ronald Mallet? Professor Ronald Mallet, I think he's called.
I think it was. It was using the spin on quarks, wasn't it? Basically subatomic particles. Yeah, to send messages back and forward in time, which is interesting concept. And if you were to do that, you'd send a simple message in a simple format, like binary would be.
Yeah,
one of those formats.
There's a lot of things that in physics, sending information through time might not actually break any laws. It might actually be. Don't think it's easy, but they didn't just send information right there. They sent an object. So they sent an actual probe, which it does sound like a probe to me. This thing isn't very big. Is it about 6 feet by 3 feet by 9 feet?
9 by 9 by 9. The one that was seen by Burroughs and Peniston, I believe, 9 feet by 9 feet by 9 feet, and 30 foot at the base is the one that Larry Warren apparently. Larry Warren says he's 30 foot at the base, so maybe a little bit big.
Yeah. Larry does sound like a liar, though, doesn't it? Like if you go, we've all got a mate whose name is Larry. Oh, Larry's at it again.
I was just stabbed on the pub. I saw a 9-foot UFO the other night. I saw a 30-foot one.
Yeah.
Yeah, automatic gainsay, yeah.
I was probed twice.
Maybe you just jumped on the bandwagon.
Let's just go around the tiles again. Steve, what do you think? Is he telling the truth? For one, I think it's the download that's important, because he wasn't the only person to have seen the actual object, but he's the one that touched it. So is he telling the truth?
Yeah, yeah, I think he is. It's quite an elaborate story to make up, and especially with the touching it and feeling like the Flash as well. And yeah, I think he is.
Okay, Dave.
Again, watching a lot of videos and seeing him speak and looking at his mannerisms and the way that he comes across, and the narrative impact, or the narrative physical impact points that he gives with his body motions. He's saying things in time with points he's trying to make. Things like that, psychologically, meaning that he's in unison with his thoughts, memories, as well as his emotions when he's doing it. He doesn't really come across as a liar. I would say he believes what he is saying to be true. I will say that he believes what he's saying is true.
That's a good, that's a good.
How about you, Damien?
Very credible witness, military career, nuclear base deputy,
No, that's Holt.
That's Holt.
Oh, that's
Holt.
Holt.
guy.
Where this is deputy. Where was he in terms of
He was a
rank at
sergeant.
the base? He was a sergeant.
He was the shift supervisor of central security control for the East Gate on that night on the 26th.
Okay, I wasn't sure of his exact position. Sorry. I think I'll save that for later about combining Holt and Penniston. But yeah, I think with just Penniston, he comes across as very believable. With his story. He's a credible witness. I tend to believe that he's telling the truth.
Yep.
I'm just going to agree with Dave again. I think bare minimum, he believes it as a bare minimum. I mean, you can never completely negate possible mental health or just being a fantasist, but I think he believes it. And I would argue that at least the bulk of the story is true. Whether whatever happened to him when he touched the thing screwed with him, which I can imagine it would, some sort of psychic download from an alien craft, that's going to mess with your head. And I don't see any problems with a lot of the debunkers will talk about how his stories evolved over time, that he's done this hypnosis and all this sort of thing to try and learn more. I have no problem with any of that, considering what he went through at all. So yeah. So Holt.
Ooh.
The base commander. Here we go. Because I've got kicked out, everything's reset. There we go. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt was the deputy base commander. He heard about everything that happened on the 26th. On the morning of the 27th, he grabbed hold of Buddy, or Bud, whatever his name was, and a couple of others that witnessed things, and he got, he got them to tell him exactly what happened. So then on the night of the 28th, when he got reports they're back, he was like, right, the story is rife around the base. Everyone's bloody talking about it. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to sort this out. And he said he was out there to debunk it. He was no nonsense.
Yep.
Then he got out there and saw a crap load of aliens running around. But he talked about, like you said, Dave, earlier, about this bright light. It then exploded. He says he saw these lights moving around in a grid-like pattern in a really intelligent way. And obviously you've then got the tapes, which are pretty convincing. They're on the earlier video that's on the channel just for this. So you look at the end of the video, the tapes are actually on there. Who wants to add anything to that? Because I mean, there's a lot to what he said, but he didn't come out and say a lot of it until after he retired. So again, he didn't come out with a lot of this until more recently. I think it's about 2015 or something when he started to really come out. But he did actually say, and something that was interesting that when we talked about this when we were down there, is that there were reports that this object was seen on radar.
Yes.
Penniston talked about it, but he obviously had no proof of that. Holt says he did.
Well, we missed. Well, I suppose, that was from the night before, wasn't it? It was from the Penniston that saw the landing, and that they went out, weren't they, doing the investigative work in the landing zone, doing the Geiger, reading and taking.
Yeah, they didn't use a Geiger counter, but yeah,
they did use a Geiger counter. Yeah.
Yes. I don't think they did. I know it is a type of Geiger counter, but I've read about which one it is. It's called something else. Doesn't matter. It works the same way.
For all intents and purposes, it measures radiation. We'll call it a Geiger counter.
Okay.
Might as well, because that's what they're called.
It measured things in milliroentgen, so it's to all intents and purposes, it's a Geiger counter.
Yeah, a word I couldn't say when I was doing our live video. Again, another word I can't say.
Just there's actual physical evidence there that a craft of the indentations that were left as well. That the weight of the craft must have been, I think, several tons, wasn't it? Even possibly with the indentations that they found the night after Holt found. Yeah.
That's a really good point, that, Damien, because he went there along with several other personnel, Cabagna or something, and Sergeant Neville, Staff Sergeant Neville, who was operating the Geiger counter. on that night. These marks were left in, like you say, these indentations, 3 indentations were left 9 feet by 9 feet by 9 feet in the floor, and they got radiation readings that were something like 10 to 15 millirodians or something within. In each of the depressions, it was higher than the surrounding area, and then in the center of the entire marking, the triangular shape, it was higher still. They saw what appeared to be blast marks on the trees, and they even got radiation readings from the trees. So they were actually out to investigate the sighting inside the forest, if you like, of the night of the 26th, where Burrows and Penniston were there. That's the initially why they went out. But things changed, as anybody can hear on the recording, when they see something through the trees themselves.
Most definitely. If we talk about the morning, the 27th, though, just quickly, the police were called because there was an agreement, and to leave the base, there has to actually be a state of emergency, and they had a protocol in place that that's right. That they believed, Penniston and Boris believed they were going out to see a crash site. That's what they believed they were going to. And he said when Bud said that this thing had landed, they said that's not possible. It's crashed. So that's what they thought they were going out to.
Yeah, well, Burrows described seeing the red thing go down into. Sorry, Jay. Said that he described a red thing going down into the tree line that he thought was an helicopter or a plane. His first impressions, because you've raised a good point, weren't that? Oh, look, there's a UFO just come down. When he called into Central Security Control, Woodbridge, he wasn't saying it's a UFO. He thought it'd come down. The one thing that stood out is there was no concussion, no shockwave, and no sound, no ground vibration when it disappeared into the tree line. So that is definitely a point well made. Yeah,
but they actually triggered the crash protocol. But my point was that the police were called and police did come. Police dismissed this immediately. They said the indentations were probably by animals. The burn marks weren't burn marks; they were axe marks from the local wood keeper. And broken twigs and things. They didn't think it was anything. So, I mean, the police report dismissed this really quickly.
They turned up at 4 o'clock in the morning. 4 a.m. in the morning, they turned up, the police at the site, the local constabulary. And they completely disregarded the height at which these branches and foliage were broken in the tree canopy. There was a clearing in the tree canopy above. And these branches were all smacked off at a high. Whatever we've got milling about that's doing that kind of thing, I don't know.
Exactly, a giraffe.
Yeah, the site indicated that something reasonable size landed, didn't it? It took some foliage out. Yeah. However, the police are never going to be interested in it, because even if they do believe the story, police need a suspect.
Yeah.
So they just close the case as quickly as they can, so they're not interested.
I think also
Mark just left a comment telling me I need to tan my legs.
There is the protocol that you're describing is which is what allowed US military personnel to take firearms off the base, because they're not when they're on UK soil. So, which is like people like Larry Warren on the night of the 28th, even though he was he had an M16 or he was carrying an Armalite when it was on the base, he couldn't take it. They had to hand in their firearm, they had to hand in the weapons before they could leave the base. But Penniston had his 38 Special Service revolver, and he was allowed to take that out off the base onto UK soil because of the very protocol that you mentioned, the emergency protocols. Yeah,
that's fascinating. Interesting. There was actually a local ranger, woodsman, somebody that you maintain the woods anyway. He actually said that he didn't know anything that happened after the incident, but somebody did come knock his door on the morning of the 27th, and basically British accents, British men, and were asking him if he'd seen anything. And he did see, he was shown the indentations and he said, I didn't really see anything, to be honest. The interesting point by that is, though, the British weren't supposed to be informed until the Holt memo, which was like about a week later or 10 days after the incident. And the British have always said, we didn't know anything about it until the Holt memo. This guy says that's not true. That he basically had British men in black knocking his door asking him what he'd seen, if anything. But
didn't the farmer? Sorry, Jace. Didn't the farmer who owns the land at Capel Green say the same thing? He got a knock on the door.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So there's a few people. I mean, I'm pretty sure. And another farm. This wasn't at Capel Green. I forget the name of the area now, for which I apologise for. But they were stood at the door, and they noticed the animals barking, saw the lights come on at the farmhouse at Capel Green, which made them look out, and then they themselves saw a light in the sky that was travelling around. So this is a non-military personnel that's saying that they're seeing something, and that doesn't get mentioned a lot. That seems to have been forgotten about.
Slipped under the radar a little bit.
Yeah.
But then obviously you've got, like I say, that Holt and everyone, they rush out on the night of the 28th, and they see all this, as we've already said. The tapes. The tapes are pretty convincing, really, aren't they? I mean, who would, if we assume this is all BS, if we go with it's made up, right, which is one possibility, why did they make that tape?
No, you wouldn't, because it's the acting that would be required to try and pass it off as real. You hear too many emotions in the voices, don't you, of Holt and his colleagues? You can sense their non-belief and their surprise and astonishment at what they're observing, and they can't explain it. I mean, we even forgot to mention that Pennison was trained, wasn't he, in, I suppose, in aircraft identification?
Yeah, aircraft recognition. Yeah, he was.
And retrieval. He said he'd been to 22, 23 crashes. He was used to it. He knew what he was doing.
And he'd never seen anything like this. So, it's,
He talks about the colour being wrong, doesn't it? If it was a crash site, because if it was aluminium or something burning, it was the wrong colour. He brings in details like that.
When you're dealing with people that sort of like, I suppose in a way you could call it like the monster narrative, when they're adding things to a story to make it more believable. Let's just put it in this kind of way: they're likely to add fangs and claws to things to make it more believable, more scary, more outlandish. When you listen to the Holt tape, all they're describing is a red light. He describes a red light moving through the trees with a yellowish tinge to it. He doesn't say, "Look, there's a flying saucer." He doesn't say, "Look, they must be aliens." He doesn't add the fangs. He doesn't add the claws. He just states everything matter of fact. And as Jamie said, you can hear the emotive changes in the voice as things start to unravel, especially when he goes, "This is weird." When he's looking at it, it's coming towards us now. Yeah, he sounds scared.
Very much so. And I don't think you can fake that. Not soldiers, not trained actors. They'd mess up. They wouldn't get the emotion right in the right bits, and you could tell it had been put together and it was scripted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
most definitely. Yeah, I agree with you there. And that's one thing that this lets me, I think, dismiss the fact that it's just faked or a hoax. Not a hoax from the Americans' point of view. At least the Americans believed what they were seeing. We'll talk about hoax later. One of the criticisms, though, is that Holt talks about laser light and laser beams, like so, passing by his feet and things, but he doesn't mention it in the tapes. I don't think that's a credible, real criticism, though. To be honest,
I agree.
Quite short little bits of the tape, because he's trying to save the tape, because it's one of those old-fashioned little jobbies.
Yeah.
And yeah,
who is it that mentions the tractor beam of light that comes down from the craft? Was that Holt?
Holt says there's a beam of light. Yeah, there's a beam of light coming down to the ground, but he doesn't say it's a laser beam of light in the tape. He says it's a beam of light coming down to the ground. They're shining like a red light down to the ground. But
you've just got that Warren talked about, isn't it? But
but you've got retrospectively thinking. If I see something that I can't describe at a given moment because it doesn't fit in with what I'm used to at the present, in the future, when I think back to my experience to help describe the experience that I've had, I might use something that's relevant then. Do you know what I mean? So while it might not have been in 1980 for him to say the words like lasers and so on and stuff like that, in 2015, 35 years later, he's thinking, you know what? Yeah, a laser does suit what it was like a laser. Now I think of it, so it's not massively outlandish, and it doesn't prove to us the fact that he's lying in any way.
These people, what they expect him to do, stand there in this situation and actually like describe everything that's going on in a, you know what I mean? It's like, come on, be reasonable. So yeah, no, it's not a criticism of the tapes. It's a
No, I
nonsense.
don't think so. I don't think
Technology
so.
and
No.
language evolving.
Yeah.
That's and then you're therefore able to use new vocabulary to explain a past incident, perhaps in a better method than you could. I mean, when was the laser invented? I don't even remember.
I can't remember when that came out.
I think it's one of those things. It was around for quite a while, but it's only like used in the 60s. So we only figured out what to do with it quite late.
Yeah, was it not invented by Tesla, but then the FBI? Oh no.
And then another American inventor invented it. Yeah, okay, yeah, possibly. I don't know.
So my favourite Tesla story was that it broke the newspapers that a guy had invented X-rays. So Tesla sent him an X-ray of himself, a full body X-ray of himself, and wrote in the corner, "Congratulations on your discovery." Like Tesla had done it ages ago and just not told anyone. So, I love that.
Check him out.
So we'll move on then to,
we've
mentioned him a few times, the Burrows, and actually I've had the ticker tape going across the bottom by mistake for ages, but I'll ignore that. I'll sort it in the edit. So Airman First Class John Burrows obviously was on the scene with Penniston.
Yeah.
On the evening of the 26th. There's a couple of things more recently with John. One of the things though that's most interesting is he's not been well. He was sick almost immediately after the incident with symptoms that were very similar to radiation poisoning. He and that was in the 80s. Sorry, in 2011 he got very unwell and he's got a heart condition. His mitral valve in his heart completely failed. He was 50 years old at the time. It's not very common for somebody that age to have that particular condition. But the US government and the VA refused to pay for his medical bills. So he sued them and won. They basically, his lawyer came out and went, "This is an admission that UFOs are real," because Burrows didn't beat around the bush. He said, "There was this incident, there was this UFO, whatever the hell it was, and I got dosed with a crap load of radiation and it's made me sick."
It's true though, because the base commander went out the following day and did readings of the background significantly higher than background levels of radiation in that area that Burrows and Penniston were present the night before. So there isn't really a leg for the army to stand on there that it wasn't on army business that he incurred those injuries. There's physical evidence, isn't there? And it's all probably required in the court of law, I assume.
Yeah. As part of the court case, the lawyers actually did get hold of 2 MOD documents that said there was readings taken, because the radiation has been argued loads. The debunkers go, radiation's everywhere. They've argued that quite a few times. But there's a couple of MOD documents that there was a lot of radiation.
In a physiological sense, has it been proven that his heart condition is a direct result of radiation, or is that just his claim? Because while it isn't common for because he developed AFib, hasn't he, as well? While it isn't common, it's not unheard of for men or women for that matter, but men usually to develop cardiac complaints in middle age or in the 50s. It is. People can be born with congenital defects, that heart defects that they don't even know about until we get sudden adult death syndrome. Hidden heart problems that people don't know about until something happens. And you look at, I mean, this is going off and it's a segue, but it's still relative, is when you go to Chernobyl. When the first responders, if you like, went into that location to fight the fire in the reactor, not 1 or 2 of them come out with radiation sickness. All of them caught radiation sickness in some way, shape or form. And the ones that were closer to the reactor core, or what would be known as the elephant's foot, were more irradiated than the ones that were further away from the elephant's foot. Now, Burrows, by definition, wasn't as close to the object as Penniston was, but he's claiming radiation sickness has caused him to become ill. And Penniston's fine.
Yeah.
So it's something about that doesn't add up for me. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, I agree with you. He'd expect Penniston to show more severe symptoms than Burrows, as he would have experienced a higher dose getting closer to the craft. Although he did say when he got within very close to the craft. He said, I think from about 50 meters out or so, wasn't there? It was like he was battling against some kind of
Static
force
charge,
field that to get closer to the craft. But once he got within 10 meters, maybe, of the craft, that field seemed to subside, and it went back to him being able to move normally. And he was just surprised to gain that full, strength back almost.
He said it was almost felt like it was like a wall of static energy that he was like moving through mud, almost trying to get to it, very laboured trying to get to it.
Like wading through water.
But yeah,
the neck go in, all that sort of thing. But then when he was in the field of influence, he said it completely changed and he was able to walk through it. So maybe he didn't get radiation sickness because Penniston was protected.
That's what I was going to say. Maybe there's a protection within that zone around the craft, that maybe it creates some kind of force field or some kind of field around itself. Maybe it has something to do with its propulsion system.
That being said, at some point, Penniston would have been the same distance from the craft as Burrows was, and therefore subjected to the same radiation levels.
Yeah. And you'd have thought for about the same sort of time, whilst they were both in the 50-meter bit, unless Burrows stayed in that 50 to 10 meters and Penniston moved into the 10 meters and was in the exclusion zone, maybe. And Burrows stayed getting zapped with the radiation for a much longer time period than Penniston fighting his way into the craft. Possibly, I don't know. I'm just thinking on my.
I think it's interesting though that they basically he went to court. I think it's interesting that he won based on what he said, but also I think it's interesting that when they tried to then get the medical records from the military, they were classified and they weren't allowed to have them, and they never got them. That is odd. I don't know why his medical records would be classified. So, more recently, Burrows has been in the news again because he's got a new book. The weaponization of unidentified aerial phenomenon. He talks about lots in this book, and he says there's been lots of research that he's been involved in. He talks about some sort of experiment potentially. He brings up the lighthouse, which we're going to mention in a minute. But one of the things he talks about is EM energy being harnessed by the lighthouse and being focused on the forest, and it was actually that potentially was what they experienced. I think I don't know, maybe he's hinting that they hallucinated the rest because of the experiment. I've read parts of the book, and to be honest, it meanders a little bit. But then he also talks about that he saw, what they maybe saw was plasma and energy that maybe had some form of intelligence. And he talks about dimensional beings again, and this potentially being not a solid object that they actually saw. That's pretty new and pretty different to what other people have said about what they saw, even though it fits in with the orbs of light and the way it broke up. Holt talks about this energy exploding into lots of little bits. But what do you guys think about that maybe changing tact that he says is research based?
Two people can experience the same event, but can have two different paradigms. On how and that they fit the experience into their own paradigm of life. Like we've said before many times, it's very hard to change the thinking of the current generation. When you do sort of radically change the thinking, it's the next generation that grows up knowing it to be fact, as it's hard for the current generation to accept that greater change sometimes.
Intelligent energy. You think that might be a bit beyond our thinking at the moment?
Well, all matter is essentially energy. Everything is energy. We're probably all just vibrating strings, basically. So yeah, I believe that it's possible. That I wouldn't want to rule that out.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you. To be honest, it's more than possible. I don't see anything in science or physics that says it's not. So,
if you want to use EM radiation or a focused energy beam of electromagnetic energy, then you're going to need what's a focused array. So you're going to need a parabolic dish, or you're going to need what's known as a Yagi directional antenna. Because otherwise you're using an omnidirectional way of distributing the energy, which means everybody will be affected within a certain area until it dissipates, or the fall off of the wavelength, if you like. And also, you've got to. It's got to coincide with making sure the people that you want to irradiate or test this weapon on are within that focused beam at any one given time and in the exact location from this lighthouse. Them people in the spread of this beam, in this narrow cone of energy, this electromagnetic energy that will be emanating from the lighthouse, and not going to stop the levels of radiation. People behind them would also get caught with it, and people further on and further out, civilians and so on and so forth. It's a little bit far-fetched for me.
But I mean, he's a slightly older gentleman now, I suppose.
So it's an interestingly built 1980s lighthouse.
Yeah.
If it's capable, it's capable of harnessing and weaponizing EM, energy without a big array.
Why they ripped it down then?
You're just using milliwatts of electromagnetic energy. You're using I assume it's going to be in the gigahertz. So you're speaking like massive microwave energy. But of course, the larger the antenna are, the more you have the driven elements, and then the radiating elements within a Yagi antenna, and the more of them that there is, the more decibel gain you get of focused energy, and the more rejection you get on the sides and on the rear of this antenna because of that. But to generate that power, to generate the electromagnetic energy, the actual tuned circuitry and the amplifier that will be getting used at the time, which you can only assume would be the equivalent of what would be like old NPN semiconductors of the time, because it's the 1980s. You're looking at a massive piece of equipment to be housed in here to generate enough power to pull that off, because I believe Orford Ness Lighthouse was like 15 miles away, something like that. That's it. I think it was a fair few miles away, 11 miles away. So, and it's a fair way to chuck a focused beam of microwave energy in 1980. We were aware that they were there. I just think it's pretty far-fetched, personally.
No, it doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah. He seems like a skeptic to me, Burrows. He's like a skeptic, and he's scratching around for an answer that doesn't want to involve the truth of the matter, and then it's more likely some kind of intelligently controlled craft, possibly extraterrestrial, possibly from the future. Who knows? And I just don't think he can handle that. And maybe he's come up with this as his explanation to the events of that night.
So we quickly go through what some of the debunking theories are, some of the theories that are not alien. So we mentioned the lighthouse. So do you want to go around the tiles again, just to think? So the theory that actually this was all they'd seen was the lighthouse.
No,
not a chance.
Absolutely not. A bright white beam of light that flashes round constantly, it goes round and round and around and around with synchronicity. Absolutely, Damien. Yeah, they've been stationed there since 1951. The 81st Fighter Wing. 1951. They didn't leave there until 1993. I am fairly sure that in the 30 years, or almost 30 years, up until that point, that the 81st Fighter Wing had been at that location. They knew that there was a lighthouse there a few miles away. Yeah. Now, I'm no scientist, but I'm going to assume that the flashing white light on the top of a tall building on the coast that kept going around and around might have been a giveaway to these people. Now, given that these people are allegedly, guarding nuclear munitions, I would like to think that they would understand what a lighthouse would look like.
Yeah. Penston does talk about, doesn't he, that Burrows were off at one point. He's trying to catch up with the UFO. And Penston was like, why are you chasing it? And
it doesn't explain yet. It doesn't explain the actions that the so-called, we'll call it UFO because that's what we're talking about. That it take the type of flight characteristics, the fact that it was weaving in and about trees, the fact that people describe it as being like a physical object, that it was a completely different color, that it rose up into the sky and come back down again, that it was waving from side to side. I mean, I don't know. Is this a special designed lighthouse at Orford Ness?
No. I was actually there 20 years ago when the lighthouse was still there. and you have to go out of the woods and up towards that whatever green until you can see the lighthouse.
Capel Green, yeah. There is only a certain area where you can see it from the woods, and I forget the name of it now, much to my chagrin and everybody else's, I suppose. But there is only a certain area that you can actually see it from clearly.
Yeah,
that's it.
Exactly. It just happens that what they were seeing was in the rough direction of the lighthouse. I suppose that's where people get it from, but nah, the lighthouses are nonsense. So the SAS. This is always my favourite theory. I love this theory. The British Army has a noble tradition of messing with the Americans every chance we get. So that's why I like the story. But the story goes basically that some SAS were trying to sneak their way onto the base to test its security because there were nuclear weapons there. They tried to parachute in. They didn't know the radar had been upgraded and they got caught. They had the cat kicked out of them. And they kept being called illegal aliens or some sort of alien zombies. So that gave them the idea to mess with the Americans and pretend there was aliens. They used different coloured flares. They used papier-mâché things and stuff that was lights that were radio controlled, and apparently all this stuff to mess with Americans and make them look stupid. If it's true, really worked. Any ideas? Any thinking on that? It's really elaborate if this is what they did. Anyone?
I was leaving space for anybody else. No, right. Just earlier that year, 1980, Prince's Gate, the Iranian embassy siege.
Yeah,
the Iranian embassy siege in 1980. The world was aware of the SAS because of the Iranian embassy siege. They were viewed all over the TV. They were known because of Margaret Thatcher. She went and even spoke to them the following day and patted them on the back and all this kind of thing. The SAS and many UK special forces were involved, especially in the 1980s. You also got to remember that there was a build-up of other situations going on around the world, especially in the Middle East, where these men were being deployed. Now, the SAS is described as the 22nd Special Air Service Regiment, but it's not a regiment in so much as 2 battalion type size strength. You're not talking about a couple of thousand men here. You're talking about at most 160 men in all of the different groups, but usually 120 that are deployed all over the world. Is it A squadron, B squadron, D and G? You get air, land, sea, and communications, that kind of thing. And why would they want to do? I don't think they needed to test the Americans. I don't think they needed to test any kind of sort of international diplomatic incident if anybody would have reacted badly. I also think that when you're talking about somebody like Jim Penniston, he would know the difference between what was feeling a metallic object rather than a papier-mâché one in the middle of some woods. I mean, they're good at shooting people. They're good at snipers. They're good at breaking into buildings. They're good at abseiling down ropes, coming out of helicopters, crawling across the floor, using all kinds of weapons. I don't know any origami or papier-mâché experts within the SAS. It could be a trait I've not learned about it yet, but for me, it seems a bit far-fetched. When you hear a lot of these explanations as to why I went on, it seems like lazy investigation or lazy research.
Scratching the barrel.
Yeah. I love it. I think if the SAS wanted to do it, they're the people you'd want to send in. If you're going to mess with the Americans, I'd get the SAS to do it.
Yeah, and I have to say this as well. When you're passing selection in the SAS, you've got to do evasion. Is one of the latter stages of selection in the SAS. And, you leg it and they'll come and look for you. And if they find you, they'll give you a bit of a kicking and they'll put you through torture for 24 hours, whatever, to see if you can break. Trust me, if the SAS were going to play any kind of prank on American military personnel, Bentwaters or Woodbridge storing nuclear weapons, why not just kidnap a few of them as well? And, put them through that kind of thing, just to throw a few schmoolies or whatever, the looms. They use a lot of illuminated flares, basically, put looms and stuff like that in the hope that they're going to scare them. When they're bright enough, you will see the smoke trail off the back of a loom. If you're close enough up, you will. When you're far away, you don't.
No.
And they can hang for a long time, and they will hang. They can fall diagonally, they can fall straight down. They act many ways, Schmooly flares or looms. But, you know, for it to like float in and out and side to side from the side of trees, one thing that does sort of like strike me as being that it could possibly, or where you could sort of like attribute it to being a flare, is that when Colonel Holt says that the red eye type thing that seemed to be winking at them, as it moved out of the trees, it seemed to be dripping molten metal, and flares will drip
Particularly older ones
the
from
chemical
the 80s,
component,
or magnesium ones and things.
yeah. But I'm not wearing the SAS. We're playing with them.
No.
I think the SAS were riding a high of doing the Iranian embassy siege. There were lots of things going on in the 1970s regarding hostage situations, airlines being taken over, hijackings. You'd had the Munich massacre, where the German police and special forces messed up that with the Jewish Olympic team that got held hostage. There were plenty of situations throughout the 1970s, the late 1970s, where they were massively focused upon that kind of thing, counterinsurgency, terrorism, playing games with the Americans based on UK soil. I'm not wearing that one.
No, I'm very doubtful. Maybe in the British military it could occur. Some kind of vendetta between one unit and another for something that went on, you know, but probably not across international.
The cost of training an SAS soldier is significant. They're one of the best trained soldiers in the world. There's nothing really like Israelis, and maybe the SEALs are coming even close to them. There isn't a commanding officer in the world that would authorize them to parachute into a US base where, if they're seen, they could potentially get shot at, or worse, or potentially killed. For what reason? There would be training exercises like this where we would test the security of a base like this, but it would be organized and properly done. It wouldn't be in this like secret way where the Americans don't know we're coming, because that's when somebody gets killed. And like Dave said, it's not really a regiment. We called it a regiment back in World War II because we wanted to scare Rommel. It was never a regiment, and the numbers are quite small because they're special forces unit. It's not like the Navy SEALs where there's thousands of them. It's there's a few hundred at most. It's no, it's never. I love the story because I think we always love messing with the Americans. There's a long history of stealing from the Americans as well. Whenever we're anywhere near a camp with them, the best thing their equipment's much better than ours. We steal off them every chance we get. But no, it's not true. This is nonsense. But a good story, and that's what we're here for. Good stories.
Yes.
Are there any other debunks in stories you've heard of? I mean, because I know there's one that was this could have been a satellite re-entry, a bit like Kecksburg and the Bell.
yeah, the Kecksburg Bell, yeah.
That it was actually a Russian or secret satellite coming down.
Probably better to rephrase. Are there any other plausible theories?
Yeah, Damien, yeah.
Because otherwise we're here from now till...
Nailed it.
I agree with you. There's loads of theories, and
You've nailed it there.
That's the point. None of them are plausible. So let's go with our conclusions then. So,
excuse me.
This event, often called the British Roswell, is that? I mean, the comparison to actually what happened is not true. Because I mean, the Roswell was a crash. This was not. But on a level of importance, is it the British Roswell? Steve, come on.
It's very significant, and it has a big impact within. Oh, that side, isn't it? Within.
I like your choice of words there. Impact. I see what you were doing
within British ufology, and it is one of the biggest stories, isn't it? I personally believe it happened. Yeah. The evidence with the radiation, the indentations in the ground, and the tree canopies on top, and the recordings as well. You couldn't act that up, especially two soldiers at the time back in the 80s. Yeah, for me, something definitely hit the ground.
Something
and,
happened.
Yeah, 100%.
How about you, Dave?
Me.
Is it fair?
Well,
Giddy.
before I love it when I get a turn because I just absolutely waffle, total diatribe. But
Damien,
I
you'll
think,
go.
yeah, it's probably the best option. That is to pass it right over. Don't let him ever go. He'll never shut up. But there is a few things that actually went on in 1980, just a few weeks in that area before Rendlesham Forest, that nobody seems to want to speak about. However, I'm not like that because I'm going to do it. Now, I've made some notes of these things. That makes a nice change, doesn't it? So strap yourselves in. It'll only take a minute or two because I'm sure that these guys, the brief history and mystery guys there, they had a lovely time over the weekend. But briefly, which is worth going out for, there was a UFO sighting in Kent, okay, on the 15th of December 1980, where acclaimed ufologist and author Timothy Good saw a bright white light on the way home to his flat. It was motionless, but it intrigued him enough to rush home and get his telescope. And he saw this at 4 o'clock. So he got his telescope, he come back out, and by the time he got his telescope, it was 4:15 and it had gone. Now, the following day, a report from the Kentish Times called Russell Bowie, telephoned him and asked him whether he'd had any reports of anything the previous day. And he said, yeah, well, I've seen something myself, you know. And this Bowie fellas then said he'd had reports into the newspaper of over 40 people had witnessed an object above the site of where the Orpington Hospital site was going to be from 3 o'clock till just after 4 o'clock, where they described that the craft seemed to hover for a time. And this is exactly the same way Timothy Good described it, that it was hovering, didn't seem to move. Described it as being motionless, went in to get his telescopes on. And he said that, but these people said the way that it disappeared, that Timothy Good obviously didn't see because he'd gone in time to get the telescope, was that it exploded into several different pieces, which was a theme that kept reoccurring during the Rendlesham Forest incident just a week later or so, 2 weeks later. Now, there's also the RAF Neatishead incident, okay, which because it's like there's not a great deal known about this. This sort of happened at the end of October, beginning of November in 1980. So again, just a few weeks before what went on at Rendlesham. And they basically was saying that there was they picked up on radar a guy called Malcolm Scurrer, who was operating the radar, picked up an aerial anomaly which first appeared at 5,000 feet, and then it jumped up several thousand feet almost instantaneously until it reached something like 90,000 feet up, and from there it vanished. But he learned later on that higher ranking officers were also aware of this radar sighting, and that a general called General Gabriel had arrived at the base at Neatishead just a few days after the incident. Arrived at Rendlesham at Bentwaters and Woodbridge just a few days after the incident. It was the same high-ranking military officer that arrived at RAF Neatishead to take the radar returns. But this same high-ranking officer again appeared at Bentwaters and Woodbridge to remove what's described as items of interest that were then taken to Ramstein in Germany. So there's rumours going about that, you know, a high-ranking military official took material or evidence from both RAF Neatishead in late October, early in November, and also from Bentwaters, Bentwaters in late December 1980. So there was things going on just over a period of 8 weeks or so, all in that kind of location. But it is worthy of note that the 40-odd people who've seen the Kent UFO sightings described it splitting into several pieces before it then disappeared. Bright light, and that's how Holt described it, and that's how Larry Warren, bearing in mind what was said about Larry Warren copying somebody else's story. However, that is congruent throughout the tale, if you like, of what went on at Rendlesham. I just thought I'd mention.
It's not a common story either, is it? It's only really these events that you're talking about that we hear this sort of thing of it. Like, we hear about sometimes orbs and something coming away, but sort of exploding.
Yeah.
Even though it is a thing, there's a Canadian incident. There was a USO. I'm going to forget the name of it now. It's named after the bay that it apparently went into.
Shag Harbour.
Shag Harbour. apparently
Shagara.
that was a bright explosion with no noise, and that it went into the ocean. So sometimes, but yeah, it is quite an unusual.
It's interesting to know that.
So, what do you actually think about the Rendlesham Forest incident? Then, do you think that was as described, the UFO?
I was too busy going off on a complete rant to even remember what you'd asked. Sorry about that.
No. Or is the
Yeah,
importance of it over exaggerated? Is it as important as we think?
So I'll just say this throw it over to Damien. Yes, I certainly wouldn't label it as the UK Roswell for the reasons you said. But I do think it has an element of importance within UFO law for obvious reasons, as far as the UK is concerned. I mean, there are things what have seemed to be bear more credence, if you like, and credibility because of the amount of witnesses, which aren't as dramatic. But you know, the body bridge sightings and other things that went on over the years. But yeah, I certainly think it's got its place, and it is important. But it's not the UK's Roswell. It's not Britain's Roswell. No,
it's not really connected.
Damien,
go Damien.
Well, that's the only reason they draw the comparison to Roswell is because it's probably our most famous incident, isn't it? I suppose we don't have anything crash-wise, do we, to go to? We're not as big a landmass as America. I don't know, unless Dave's going to, or anyone can tell me otherwise. But yeah, no, I totally believe in this incident being real. Yeah, he's very, very believable. Peniston, combine that with a non-believer that then completely changes his tune and observes the incredible as well. He's deputy base commander, isn't he? And finger on the nuclear button, nuclear on base at that time. Yeah, and we've seen interest in nuclear bases. Yeah, everything just seems to tie up to it being a real incident.
yeah, absolutely.
I'm
Doesn't it
interested to
really?
hear about different events, like Dave was mentioning, because how often do we hear about these events and they happen in bursts? They call them flaps, don't they? They have little.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
In lots of
UFO
areas.
flaps. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, from the 50s around Roswell, even you could argue we're going through one at the moment. I think there's too many people of high credibility and high rank, and that have got no real. If you're a colonel in the American Air Force, you're doing all right. Your pension's pretty good. You don't need to go on the UFO circuit and do these things and appear in the newspapers and things. So there's the financial gain maybe, but really you're putting yourself out there for a lot of ridicule potentially. The stories line up. They've evolved over time, but I think there's good reasons for that. I think something really thing happened here, and some of the theories that, like I said, this was just a lighthouse or whatever, they're nonsense. They hold no water whatsoever. And something happened here that was
100%.
Yes, Peniston and Holt's accounts, they're credible people, giving what I believe to be the truth, or maybe a slightly embellished truth, a touch maybe, but I don't think so that much. They don't seem like the type of men to really even embellish. I think they're telling us exactly how it happened, probably as military men. I mean, the fact that Holt used a tape recorder and had it on him, and that's how he operated. He used to record his thoughts, so that he had down in audio recording what he thought at that time and moment on specific things at specific times. He's a pretty precise man.
Yeah,
it's quite amazing he did that as well. So
and his motives again were whatever had happened on the 26th. I'm getting my dates wrong now. Whatever on the 26th was disrupting base. Was disrupting the base. Was disrupting the men. They were all talking about that, so they're doing their bloody jobs. So I think so. He wanted to go out there and just debunk it and put it to bed, and he made it worse. So no, I think this is one of the most interesting cases, and I'm really glad we got to go down there, because it's, like I said, it's nice to actually walk the walk, and actually be in the area sort of thing. And Steve's getting attacked. But while we were down there, we saw something weird. All right. Now, I have had so much crap for the video that I've been called names. I've been called stupid, not just by Steve, that way. Not just by Steve. But I think that one comment was, this BS doesn't help our credibility at all. What are you doing, sort of thing. just calling me an idiot.
Should have really probably better. Jamie's quick camera skills when observing something aren't the best.
Well,
That's pretty
we
much.
can only see the damn
You
thing
weren't
for 60
expecting it, though,
seconds.
were you? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
And it's like I said to you at the time, I spent the first 30 seconds going, what the hell is that?
Oh,
Yeah.
and then you had the thought, oh, I'll get my phone out, and by that point you're already probably
was already
halfway
too
through
late.
the entire length of the sighting. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was going into the trees already, which was why it looks like it's flashing, but it isn't. But also, one argument I said was just put the bloody video on, don't talk about it. And I'm like, well, we were eyewitnesses, so we were going to talk about it. Now, most people have said it's ISS, the ISS. So I looked up the times. The ISS flew over about 10:30, and then it flew over again at about 1:30. We saw this thing at 12:20, so it's not the ISS. So we can put that to bed.
Yeah, 12.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was 12:20.
No, it was definitely 25 past because I looked at the time as I saw it.
I've got the timestamp on the video.
Oh, okay.
So,
Well, I'm pretty sure as I was looking at it, I looked at the time and made a note of it. But anyway, okay.
Well,
Damien
timestamp on the video. I win.
Away.
Anyway, either way, it was an hour until the ISS flew back over.
Yeah.
I've seen the ISS loads of times
Mm.
because I used to try to con my kids that it was Santa. I say that in the video. And when you see the ISS, it's just a speck of light. And it just goes across. It doesn't look any brighter than a star. This thing was like 10 times brighter than anything in the sky. I saw it in the corner of my eye and went, what the is that? But we're very careful to say in the video that it's not a UFO, not a thing. There you go. So, well, have you guys seen the video, for one? Damien, you don't have to answer. You were there. So do you think the crap I've had for it is fair to begin with? I've had some really unpleasant things.
Not really. No, not really. But you're going to get it because that's what people are like, aren't they? Isn't it? So.
I don't know. I think it's kind of fair. It's another grainy image of something observed, isn't it? With wobble and you're not gonna, unless you did your best, but you're gonna get stick for it.
To be called an idiot though, and to
be fair, I think in defence of you guys, right? The truth of the matter is that if you, rather than being an armchair expert like a lot of people are because they watch a few YouTube videos and documentaries on UFO sightings and such, if you actually investigate UFO sightings at a grassroots level, most of them are what's just known as lights in the sky. They account for 90% of sightings, if not more. I don't know the actual numbers because it's difficult to ascertain depending upon which group you believe in. But large groups back in the day, like Bufora, Quest International, or MUFON in the States, and various others will know this. Most sightings are just of lights in the sky. That is it. All you're seeing is a light, and more often than not, these lights are not doing what lights we do know the origin of are doing. So by definition, because they don't, people film them with cameras that have got limited ability to resolve an image in them kind of lighting conditions. So therefore, it's going to appear with a halo around it, going in and out of focus, or at very best, just looking like a little white light. You can't help that. That's just the way it is. When you can get the best cameras in the world, you can get some really fantastic like telescopes. You look at a star, which is ostensibly just a pinpoint of light in the sky. It still looks just like a pinpoint of light in the sky. Now, Damien and Jamie saw a pinpoint of light in the sky that was more than a pinpoint. It was very bright, and it was acting unlike other lights that they knew the origins of. So they recorded it. It doesn't make them sellouts. It doesn't make them stupid. It doesn't make them knobheads or whatever type of insults people want to throw around. They were witnessing an event that they tried to record and document, and that is what they did. And they presented it to other people for them to give their opinions of it, not to be slated on the internet. Just saying.
Yeah, you are right, Dave. Unfortunately, well said. I still think you won't stop the comments coming in.
No. I just can't believe the aggression of some of them. That was the thing. I'm forgetting as well. Even though the video was crap, we were eyewitnesses to something that we couldn't explain. We didn't say we were visited by aliens. We didn't say we were programmed. We saw a light in the sky. We didn't understand.
More luminous than probably any star in the night sky, I'd say. It was a bit brighter, wasn't it, than anything else there, which is what drew our attention to it. Maybe it wasn't. Yeah, but was it twice as bright as the other stars? I don't
Mate,
think
I
it
said
was.
10
It
times.
wasn't.
It was much bigger.
it
It
did
was like
look-
that in the
You
sky.
reckon?
Get a
You reckon
star.
10 times as bright?
It
It
did.
was much brighter.
It's probably
And
hard
it
to
wasn't
judge
a white light
luminosity.
either. It was like a yellow light, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like a star. It was like a yellowish light,
Yeah.
and it
Exactly.
traversed the entire horizon
like-
from east to west in probably about a minute and a half.
Mm.
It was
Yeah.
it was going quicker than I've ever seen any
It was the
satellite.
speed of it, wasn't it? It was weird. It was so fast. But I mean, the ISS does move quick. I mean, you remember the ISS does an orbit of the Earth in like 90 minutes.
Excuse me.
Some other one said it was a Starlink satellite. I could believe Starlink. Apparently, they are incredible. I've never seen one myself in real life, but they've caused loads of UFO misidentifications, haven't they?
Oh, yeah. Would you only just see one though if it was Starlink?
We saw it again the next day,
And not,
but it was twilight, so we couldn't really. It looked completely different, but we saw a light go across the sky, similar sort of position.
I did
No,
check the times of Starlink and sent them via Facebook. That's what all that lot was about.
None of them
I did
were
check the times,
similar.
and none of the times matched up for where you were. Your position, see, Steve. I didn't mean to insult you, but none of the times matched up for when Starlink was going over from where you could view it in Suffolk.
No,
I agree.
think
Nothing
we
seemed to quite
did.
line up.
We did see Starlink going over the second night, though, didn't we?
We saw something, yeah. Oh, we've lost Dave now as well.
Yeah, it was
They're dropping like flies. It's just me and you.
Probably you hosting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
probably
exactly.
you.
So
Then.
they're starting to come back.
No, but given you've
no,
gone
it's Dave.
and they've both gone, it's probably your internet that's dropped.
I was thinking, what's going on there? Like, is it because the truth's coming out about Starlink?
Steve?
Steve's gone dark.
My camera, all the lights are still on. It's the webcam. It's shocking, man.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they say, and What's Your Poison points out, one orbit of the ISS is 93 minutes, so that thing zips.
How long does the ISS take though to traverse the entire horizon of the sky? Then,
if it's 93 minutes all the way around, mate, it's not going to be long, is it? So
that's an interesting question. I have to do some math.
It would usually view for something like 1 minute 20 seconds or something like that. I did find a satellite that went over, viewable from your location. Bearing in mind I wasn't sat on your knee, so I don't know where you're at. But given that you're in Rendlesham Forest, that region, so I went with. Did find one, and they do have ratings of intensity of brightness, by the way, which I know you guys know that, but was seen would be visible at 20 past 12, so 00:20 a.m., which was a Russian satellite SL-14R-B, which was launched September 1982 from the Plesetsk Space Complex in Russia at an altitude of 623 kilometers, which is regarded in the scale as being assorted bright, so sometimes bright, sometimes not. It has an orbital period of 97 minutes, going on its orbit. On that night, seen as being relatively dim in comparison to what it usually is. I've got the latitude and the longitude for it, where it would travel over and all that. Like, it's irrelevant to everybody else here. But on that particular night, even though it's listed as being assorted bright, on that night, because of where it was in relation to you, 51.96 degrees north, 1.35 degrees east, it would have appeared relatively dim, and it is white, not yellow or orangish.
Yeah, no, this was definitely like a yellow tint to it.
Brilliant timing, though.
The other thing, the most exciting thing was we talked about nothing else, to be honest, for the next day. The guy we were with, my mate John Boy, he's not a believer in all this stuff at all. He's a complete skeptic.
Why do you always say boy after John? I'm just curious.
I've always called him John Boy. Ever since I met him, I've always called him John Boy.
Because he's not just John. Just reminds me of that scene from Family Guy. Every time you say John Boy.
Fan of the Waltons there.
The Waltons saying good night.
Yeah, fan of the Waltons.
I hear it and start.
That's where I get it from, but I've always called him John Boy, mate, since the day I met him.
Okay.
Dave will always be Davey, and Steve will always be Stevie Baby.
Absolutely.
I always call you D. I don't, everyone else calls you Damo. I think now I'm not doing that. I can't be asked.
Yeah, Damo.
That's a second of my life I'll never get back. D. There we go. Done.
I'll just anyway, go on. Sorry.
But yeah, I think we saw something. But at the end of the day, I've never seen anything like that before in my life. Simple as that. I've seen the ISS. I look at the stars all the time. The only thing I can think of is that it was something normal, but it was an unusually hot evening. So those atmospheric conditions were maybe making a think, oh, that's interesting. Branson and Bezos didn't even complete one orbit. The fanfare dweebs, damn, even the moon launches didn't have a better theatre. So, but we saw something strange. I can't argue with that. And the
You'll probably see some more strange things now. You've seen the first one.
Deep Throat said something though. I missed it. What did he say? We have the guy that doesn't want to be identified.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Now that you've seen that, you'll probably see more things.
It's like Bob Lazar in his first video.
I missed that.
You've not got a light.
I have, mate.
No, it's his camera, isn't it?
Every my camera's bugged.
But I was
TV
like,
lights on.
Yeah. Somebody else had a go at me for saying that it's because I've got a UFO channel that it doesn't matter what I see. I could have an alien come down and probe me, and it would be irrelevant because I've got a UFO channel, so I've got no credibility at all.
Right.
Like, that's a bit unfair.
Well, that's like saying that a doctor's not believable because he's always going to tell somebody that they're ill.
Yeah,
it doesn't quite work like that.
Yeah.
The reason people go is because they're ill. You know, that's why they go there. So you have a YouTube channel about the paranormal, UFO, and mysteries and all that lot because you're interested in that. That just isn't like an absolute right. He's got to be faking, and so's that Damien fellow who says things that make sense occasionally. The pair of them are completely making things up, you know, just because they got a YouTube channel. That's pretty pathetic.
Nonsense, isn't it? Pathetic. I don't know why this video has created so much annoyance. And I don't think any of them actually watched the video. That's the other thing. They get really angry and say.
The thing is that I don't think people want to. I don't think, and when they do, they watch it for a few seconds and that's it, don't they? They don't see it through to its conclusion.
No, and then just spend longer commenting. Writing a long comment.
Yeah, I just think
come on the
people
live
find
show
it
and tell us your comments.
Too hard to believe.
Well,
trolls don't do that, Jamie, because that might involve, direct contact. It's far easier just leave a comment, isn't it? I don't even know why I'd struggle with reading all those comments, bad ones. It just depressed me. Don't do it. Ignore them.
Sorry, Damo. The constructive criticism or having an opinion and an input that's relative is welcomed in any topic, especially in the world of mystery, in the supernatural, in the preternatural, in paranormal, in ufology, in cryptozoology, whatever ology you want to throw out there, it's welcome. But assassinating people's characters because you got to flee up your ass is a completely different kind of thing entirely. Having a go at somebody, what do you want to go to a history of mystery kind of channel for if you don't want to be there for mystery?
That's it. Yeah.
And these
am I missing something here?
These are UFO people that are attacking me at the end of the day. They're on UFO groups. They're on my channel.
Well, they say they are.
I don't know. There wouldn't be any of our lovely subscribers because they're all lovely.
I know certain people that just troll the crap out of UFO groups and things like that on Facebook just for the fun of it. So
yeah, we come across them occasionally.
We don't pay attention to people who can't afford light bulbs, Steve.
Everything's
look,
lights on.
That's mad. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
TV is on.
The camera you were using is now not working properly. I
can't even do that. It's the same camera. It's the same camera.
Yeah.
What? It was working fine before. Madness.
Yeah.
Madness.
It happened last time. I think on the second stream we did. So,
I say I quite like talking to trolls. I quite like trying to debate them.
I think the biggest issue.
I'll also talk to Jehovah's Witnesses.
I love them.
Yeah,
I love them. Oh, bring them in. I'll have them all day long. Come and talk to me. Yeah. I'm not even. No, sorry. I'm trying to get it's pissed. Because it's Rendlesham. It's because you've been to Rendlesham. You've been to the site. Rendlesham has become a bit of a joke for many people because of what's gone on with some of the aforementioned people. And because of that, hey there, look who's out there. Yeah, there you go. Stormzy.
Stormzy's with us. How are you, sir?
You know, you've got it because it's such a hotbed of conflict within the UFO community in the UK, especially. And you went there, you went to the site, and in their eyes, it's like, oh, we went to Rendlesham, which is the big one in the UK, and we saw something too. How good are we? They're sort of judging you on that rather than the actual content that you're trying to put out, which is we saw a light at this location. But we're not saying it's anything. We're just saying, look, there's a weird light. We don't know what it is. And that is all you said.
Yeah, exactly.
And we saw it on the Friday night, the night we got there, not the Saturday night, where we went down into Rendlesham Forest. It was on the campsite we were on. So if you're going to fake it, you'd probably do it in the forest, wouldn't you? At the actual site and plan it for the Saturday, not the Friday.
And why not see a triangular craft? Why not say you saw it shine a beam of light down to the ground? Why not totally go the whole hog? Why stop at just a white light like you got on the camera? Really?
It was all we saw. Yeah, I tend not to lie. That was a point Peniston made, wasn't it? I think when he was interviewed, he said, "And what do your daughters think of your story? Now you've told them all about it." And then he said, "Oh, it's true. But I don't. They know I don't lie."
Yeah. What can I do about it? And that's the end of the day. That's the end of the day for us. We saw something. We can't understand it. It probably was some sort of satellite or something in orbit. We say it was probably something in orbit, but we don't know what it was.
My advice is to anybody is to watch it. Go and watch it. Watch the parameters of which it's presented and what's being said, rather than just jumping to conclusions about what is trying to be said, because it's all there on the video. I watched it, much as I didn't want to give them views because these two don't bother with me. I'm joking, but I watched it, and to me, they're not trying to present anything other than there was a weird white light in the sky. Now, if you don't know what a flying object is, if you can't identify what a flying object is, do you know where I'm going with this? It's going to be an unidentified flying object.
Yeah,
that's how it works. It's really, and if you're into ufology, if you don't understand that, you need to take up train spotting or crocheting or something like that, because you're in the wrong field.
Yeah.
Trevor's actually said there though he thinks I'm more of a skeptic than a believer. It's not actually true. I am a believer. I believe UFOs are visiting the Earth. I believe we're being visited by alien life. But the problem is I'm using the word believe. So, and I have, it's like when I'm talking about Bob Lazar, I say I have faith in him, but I'm using my critical thinking. I don't like being conned, and I have to always consider other possibilities. So, in that saying, I'm more of a skeptic. I'm not. I'm really not. But I want to find the truth, and I don't really care what the truth is. I just want to know what it is.
Yeah.
So I'll always consider the other alternatives, and sometimes I find them. I'm like, yeah, that makes more sense to me. I'll read something in the debunkers and go. I've said to you guys before. One of the first things I do when I'm researching these things is I look at the debunkers. And if the debunking stuff makes no sense, like in Rendlesham Forest, I'm like, there might be something to this. If the people that are actually really trying to tear this apart can't, then there must be something to it. Exactly. No, I don't call myself a skeptic. I am a believer.
But there's a reason. There's a reason.
Swamp gas or weather balloons.
I'm not a knower. I think that's the difference.
We're on to something here.
I think your wise of anybody is to treat your mind like a parachute, and that's it works best when it's open.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a lot of people in the UFO community though that aren't believers; they're knowers. They know it to be true, and it's a fact.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I'm like, I'm not so sure on lots of the stuff we're talking about that we can't know it for fact. We can believe it to a point. There's very few things in our community that we
pretty much mathematically it's pretty much statistically factual that there are other intelligent life forms in this galaxy.
Yeah, but visiting us is the question for me, whether they're visiting us. I can't say that it's not possible that we're all talking about nothing and actually we're not being visited by aliens. I cannot put my hand on my heart and say
I don't know, the
it's
volume
not
of
possible.
credible witnesses that have come forward and said
I'm not saying that, though,
credible
am I?
things. No, but the volume of them. It's if you get one witness, you know, when you've got hundreds, or like the UFO Disclosure Project, with you just don't get that many people coming forward with crazy stories of hallucinations.
Yeah, but like I said again, I'm not saying that. I'm saying I believe them.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, can I put my hand on my heart and say it's not possible
That they're all lying?
No, or just misidentified, or whatever else. I can't do that, mate. I have to say that it is possible. Do I believe it? No, but it's possible.
See, I go the other way. I don't think it's possible that they're all lying. I don't think that many people have got important, credible jobs where there's physical evidence, etc., of landed craft radar.
Didn't mean it harsh
to corroborate the stories. I don't know. It's
yeah. And no, Trev, I know exactly what you meant, mate. And I was just like I say, didn't take any offence at all. I'm just trying to make the point that there's there is a difference, sort of thing. And I'm explaining a bit more about me, so you know me a bit better, and why I come at these things.
That's it. You've got to stand on both sides. Stand in the middle of the fence to
fall off.
yeah, basically.
I always think you can get someone convicted in the courtroom, can't you? Off of a few people's witness testimony. You have 1,000 people that witness the same UFO sighting, and they've all got the same story, but suddenly that they're all nuts.
Oh yeah, no. The people
and
like
that makes no sense to me.
Or Mick West, sorry, seem to completely ignore eyewitness statements. It's like it's not relevant. I'm like, no, you've got trained observers seeing something. The Tic Tac video, he tears the Tic Tac video apart, Mick West.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but you're completely ignoring the eyewitness statements. And I have actually asked him directly, and he answered and said something about a point of the video. I'm like, no, I didn't. That's not what I asked you. I asked you, about the eyewitness statements. And you're calling Fraser a liar. And he just didn't respond.
Avoidance and distraction.
Mm-hmm.
Don't answer the question. Go off on a segue, something else to validate your argument without answering the question anyway. Yeah, exactly. Avoidance and distraction. It's very well known.
Yeah.
Yes. Divide and conquer. So another one isn't there of the ruling class. But anyway,
it was a brilliant weekend. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I had a few beers with my mates. It was sunny as hell, and you can tell in the video that I'm dying all the way around.
You look fairly uncomfortable, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable. Talking, walking, and trying to think in that heat was difficult, to say the least. But I loved it. It was brilliant, and I had a lot of fun. And nobody has found the Easter egg we put in yet, so you got to keep looking. Ooh. There is a little thing in that video that we did. It's the video before this on live that went on live at 6 o'clock this afternoon.
Right, I've not seen that.
I'm waiting for somebody to point it out to me, and then they'll get a shout out on the next live video. Well, I'll mention them. So if you can. But no, thanks guys. It's been emotional as always. Sorted out Rendlesham Forest now, guys. We're smashing through all these mysteries, enlightening them.
Oh no, we're not. There's a few. Yeah, we got a few.
Yeah. My ribs are still hurting, by the way, Damien, where I fell over and managed to elbow myself in the ribs and punch myself in the face at the same time. And I was sober at the time.
Did Damo see it happen?
Yeah.
It was a morning.
You should have had the camera out.
There's just a lip on the bottom of the tent where the outer bit undoes, and he just put all his weight forward to step, and then got his
on the ground sheet. On the lip of the ground sheet. Yeah.
On the lip of the ground sheet. Most people normally put their arms out first, though. I don't know. It just happened quite quick, and he didn't seem to do it.
And then just went over, and then I stood there, so my knee locked up basically, and so I went, I'm going. But I haven't broken anything. That's the main thing. I think I've just bruised them because they're feeling a lot better already. So I've cracked my ribs a few times before, and they hurt for weeks.
Yeah,
But is that how I managed to punch myself in the face as well? I'm such an idiot.
That's funny. That is funny.
John Boy said it wouldn't be a weekend away if you didn't fall over at least once. So
I
do I.
can't believe we weren't drunk.
One of
We
my
were
favourite things
sober
to do.
as well. I love camping. Camping's fantastic. Mrs.
Yeah.
Stranger, she don't like it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Listening to Damien snore and fart. And then I fell asleep and Damien got to listen to me snore and fart. So
Fantastic.
it was a good weekend. And the bar that we kept going to kept not charging us for some of the drinks. Best pub ever.
How was that? That's epic.
We've had 9
Well,
drinks.
we ordered
They've
some
only charged
drinks
us for 3.
and they didn't put them on the receipt. How
Good
else does it work?
Nice.
That's pretty much it, isn't it? Yeah, they're pretty poor.
Best pub ever. And oh man, the steak we had. But yeah, it was a good weekend. Really good weekend. So, Dave, sometimes you tell us what we're doing next week.
Yes.
And sometimes you don't.
Well, you mentioned a sort of like technique of seeing where people wanted to go the other week, and I've done it myself like last year, and only tried it the once of putting what do you guys think we should do? But with you mentioning it again, I thought, well, so there's a couple of possibilities. So I've toyed with the idea of the Voynich manuscript because I find that to be very interesting. I like the Voynich manuscript. So it's either something like that or another mystery, which might be the escape from Alcatraz. I haven't yet decided one or the other, but you will know soon.
Well, if you're still watching, if you want to dump us a comment and try and push him in a direction,
yep, absolutely.
They'll both be covered at some point. Cyrus has got, oh my God, he's freaking out over something. I don't know what. Bear, are you okay? You're being robbed? What's happening? Have you seen an alien? It's as hot over here as it is over there, by the way. We're all dying. So, guys, thank you very much. It's, like I say, it's been as brilliant as ever. Thank you for all the guys in the comments.
The manuscript.
He likes the Voynich manuscript.
Yeah. I love the Voynich manuscript. Trevor wants to do Voynich, but he can't spell it. I can't either. I spelled Forest wrong, by the way, on one of our videos. I'm such an idiot.
It is easy to get wrong.
I'm horribly dyslexic.
I'm always
yeah,
I think Dave knows that.
So we'll call it an evening. Thank you very much, and we will see you next week as always.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
See you next
Take
week.
care. Bye.
Bye.